Greetings, loved ones. Did you know that society has created barriers that prevents victims of violence from leaving their situation, and that after a survivor does choose to leave, it's not all roses and happy endings? Today, we're going to discuss more about why victims don't leave their violent relationships. So to help get these messages out, please subscribe to our channel, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Hit the like button and please share these messages with other people, because you never know, just by doing so, you may save a life. Victims not only have to deal with their own demons in their heads, but also ones that society has placed in front of them as well after they've decided to leave their abusers. Victims battle with the idea of being charged with desertion, losing joint assets, or losing their children in a custody case. There may be a lot of anxiety about poor living conditions that they and their children may be facing after a separation. And certain religious counselors or clergymen may tell them to try and save the marriage instead of focusing on helping the victim get away from the violence. Some will also reinforce that divorce is forbidden. Sometimes violence is mistaken for a domestic dispute by police officers, and not enough happens to prevent it from happening again. This is an example of what happened in the Gabby Pettito case, that they were not really sure what to do. And, there's an interesting thing that I'm going to interject here, is that they had the woman in the back of the police car, which automatically puts her as though in her mind, like she's doing something wrong. It wasn't just, oh, you're sitting there with air conditioning, but he was standing out on the street. If they put her in the back of a police car, they should have put him in the back of another police car, or put him in the back of the police car and had her talk to them in the shade by the car. So, there are instances when the victim is arrested by the police when they're only trying to protect themselves against their abusers. And there were lots of things in that video. She made a comment. She said he just wouldn't stop talking. So that was never investigated. They just sort of like, oh, and did he hit you and did that? I was really interested in knowing that if they stopped and they said, what was he saying to you? Then you could have seen that he was probably being abusive to her with emotional, psychological abuse, and that's why she was reacting the way she was. He was laughing and talking to them, and she was crying and shaking, and it was just a really bad situation. So this is where the authorities actually re-victimize the victim, don't intervene with the help that they need. There should have been follow-up. There should have been follow-up on that. Another thing that society has played a role in is making it clear that women's identity and self-worth should be based on if they stay with a man. Here in Honduras, the goal in the minds of women is to find a man who's going to take care of you and love you. And that really puts a lot of women in danger. And so even with a restraining order in place, once the woman leaves and she has a restraining order, there isn't much that stops the abuse from happening again. It's just a piece of paper. And the victim often rationalizes the abuser's behavior by blaming it on stress from work, unemployment, drugs, or alcohol, and several other factors. Like she was saying, well, I'm stressed out and I'm having this, and so he's acting like that. And no, those are all signs that something is definitely wrong. Victims oftentimes feel isolated too, with nowhere to turn and no one to turn to that would understand. And I believe this is where Gabby was, because she didn't tell her family that she wasn't having trouble with him. And they just don't believe. I remember I couldn't go to my family for help. And this isolation can be created by the possessiveness of the abuser, or it can happen because the victim is afraid or she's embarrassed that somebody would find out about it. There have been definite strides over the years in the past decades to provide shelter for victims of violence, but there's still not enough, and other programs that are needed to meet the growing need of this situation of violence that's constantly growing. And just because a victim has gotten away from her abuser, it doesn't mean that they shouldn't continue to use extreme caution. While the abuse may appear to be over, the other person may have different plans. When a victim finally leaves, I want you to know this is one of the most dangerous times in their relationship, and it can turn deadly. One study learned that men who were guilty of murdering their wives did so because their wives threatened to leave them or had just left them. I'm not saying all of this to scare you, especially if you are a victim of domestic violence. It is crucial that you get away from your abuser. But I want you to know the seriousness of your situation once you have decided to leave and take the steps necessary to assure your safety. It is literally a matter of life and death. So as you leave, you need to have measures, safety measures in place. And after you leave, you need to continue these safety measures for quite a while. If someone you know is the victim of domestic abuse, help them get the help that they need. The question is not if you are going to encounter a victim of violence. The question before God is, what will you do when you encounter them? You could be the person who saves a life. You are called. We are all called to be champions for justice. And those who suffer violence need to know that those who love them and those that don't even know them will step out and reach out to them to give them the courage and the help they need to leave before it is too late. This series is dedicated to Gabby Pettito, a bright young woman whom the world has lost because of gender violence. Please check out and support the foundation that her family has created in honor of her at GabbyPettitoFoundation.org. If you're a victim of violence, I want you to know this. Listen to me. You are valued. You are loved. You are intelligent. You are beautiful, and God does not want you to suffer violence. He wants you to live free from violence in peace and tranquility. And there is a way out. Abuse is not love. And if you're a victim of violence and you find yourself in danger, please call 911 immediately. But also reach out to somebody. Keep reaching out to somebody until you get the help that you need. To help get these messages out, please subscribe to our channel. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Hit the like button, and please, please, please share these messages with others, because you never know, by doing so, you could save a life. Tomorrow, we're going to go more in depth on this topic. Until then, God bless you.